532. Senator Dembrow, please.
Mr. President, colleagues, nearly 80 years ago, President Franklin D. Roosevelt established this nation's first national minimum wage, set at the time at 25 cents per hour. For him, setting this floor was both an economic and an ethical imperative. When he signed the National Industrial Recovery Act on June 16, 1933, FDR made the following statement, quote, "It seems to me to be plain that no business which depends for existence on paying less than living wages to its workers has any right to continue in this country. By business, I mean the whole of commerce, as well as the whole of industry. By workers, I mean all workers, the white-collar class, as well as the men in overalls. And by living wages, I mean more than a bare subsistence level. I mean the wages of decent living." Colleagues, 80 years later, with this same goal in mind, I bring to you Senate Bill 1532. This is a bill that had its genesis in the last legislative session, with bills both in the Senate and in the House. Our hearings on those bills were long, they were powerful, and they were painful. We heard story after story of low-wage workers doing work that needs to be done, work that someone needs to do. These were not glamorous people doing glamorous jobs. Is pushing people in wheelchairs around an airport glamorous work? No, but someone needs to do it. Is standing on your feet all day attending to people in a store glamorous work? No, but someone needs to do it. Is planting seedlings or doing stoop labor glamorous work? No, but somebody needs to do it. We benefit from their labor. The people who do this work should be able to live their lives and provide for their families without having to resort to charity or public assistance. And these people, frankly, are hurting. They do not want to have to rely on public assistance or charity to get by. They do not want to have to work 2 jobs or more to get by. They want to be able to make it on their own, to care for their families, performing the labor that we ask of them. We got to meet Lily, who has worked at the airport as a passenger services assistant for nearly 8 years, and she still makes minimum wage. Lily provided us with written testimony from which I'll quote, "Whatever passengers need, we do. Most of the time, we push people in wheelchairs. We help connecting passengers around the airport. We'll stop at restaurants, restrooms, stores. It is our duty to do these things, but it is also a physical and emotional job. It's emotional because we work with people. And yet, Lily can barely get by. She is one inadequate paycheck away from tragedy, and she is not alone. I think I can speak for the members of the Senate and House committees when I say that we were all moved by the workers who spoke. But we were also very moved by the concerns and perspective offered by small business owners. Some were supportive of this increase, but most were not. They were convinced that a sudden increase in the minimum wage would hurt their businesses and force them to lay off workers. They gave us much to think about. Most of us left those hearings resolved to keep working on this problem. We left knowing there would not be an easy fix if we were to address the needs of employees and employers alike. So before the session's end, House Business and Labor Chair Paul Hovey and I began a long work group process to gain a better understanding of the problem and the risks of trying to solve it in the wrong way. This process lasted through the summer and fall. This was not a traditional work group with tightly selected members. It was more of a forum. We wanted to make sure that all voices were in the room, able to listen and able to speak up. Along with many advocates and lobbyists, There were senators and representatives, Democrats and Republicans. We heard from the Oregon Employment Department and others information about just who minimum wage workers are. 2/3 of minimum wage workers are women. They are disproportionately people of color. Though some are teens, most are not. For some, it's a temporary first step to a career ladder, but most will remain at minimum wage or somewhere near minimum wage for many, many years. We heard about the potential benefits cliff and ways to address it. We learned about the limitations of the federal poverty line as a way of determining who is hurting and who is not. Dr. Sheila Martin from Portland Metropolitan Institute at Portland State University pointed us to longstanding work done at the University of Washington to track, down to the county level, what it takes for an individual or a family to be self-sufficient in our state and in others. We looked at the increases to the minimum wage that are happening in cities like Seattle and Los Angeles and in a number of other states. We heard about the ballot measures that were in process that would raise the wage very quickly in order to get workers to self-sufficiency right away. We had lots to hear and lots to read on all sides of the issue. By the end of the process, Representative Hovey and I had come to the following conclusions, which led to the drafting of Senate Bill 1532. First, the current minimum wage and its method of increasing according to the Consumer Price Index has not kept up with current economic and social realities and is exacerbating the income inequality that is currently plaguing our nation. This is especially true in the Portland metro area, but it's also true all over the state. Second, increases, if they are done gradually, will not have a deleterious effect on the economy. And we looked at a number of studies that pointed us to that conclusion. We heard from Dr. Marty Hart-Landsberg from Lewis and Clark College about studies that are studies of other studies. That is what are called meta-analyses, and the conclusion that they reached. I'll quote from that. One of the arguments against an increase in the minimum wage is that it will lead to higher unemployment. One can make theoretical arguments for and against this proposition. Economists have tried to estimate the employment effects of a rise in the minimum wage. Two of them, Christos Doukouliagos and T.D. Stanley, looked at almost 1,500 estimates of the effects of minimum wage increases on employment. That is, this is a meta-analysis of 1,500 analytical studies. 1,500 estimates on the effects of minimum wage increases on employment, and found that the estimates, quote, clustered right around zero effect, but with more of those estimates showing a slight downward pressure on employment. They concluded, quote, with 64 studies containing approximately 1,500 estimates, we have reason to believe that if there is some adverse employment effect from minimum wage rises, it must be of a small and policy irrelevant magnitude. Our own highly respected research arm at the Oregon Employment Department reached a similar conclusion, and I'll quote, studies have found that moderate increases in the minimum wage substantially increase the earnings of those at the bottom of the income distribution and reduce wage inequality. Negative employment effects of such policies are too small to have meaningful consequences for public policy. Finally, the University of California, Berkeley Center on Wage and Employment Dynamics showed the same thing. They did a very, very detailed and thorough study of this matter in doing work for the Los Angeles City Council as Los Angeles was considering raising its wage. And they found that the positive stimulative effects of getting more dollars into the pockets of low-wage workers, and lower-wage workers tend to spend all or nearly all of their earnings in their local economies, would outweigh the negative effects that might occur for some employers. And their conclusion was confirmed by a third-party analysis of several studies that were done in preparation for the LA decision to raise its wage. So again, that led us to conclude that if done gradually, this will not have a deleterious effect on our economy. Third, while we are one state, we are not one economy. We heard that from people who came and testified, and we heard it from the sociologists and economists. Regional differences are real with respect to cost of living, self-sufficiency requirements, and economic vitality and resilience. A one-size-fits-all approach is not going to work. But we also came to believe that the answer was not to leave this up to the individual cities to sort out. That would create enormous uncertainty and unpredictability for businesses. Also, we don't want to have a situation where Eugene has one minimum wage and Springfield has another, where Corvallis has one and Albany has another. These cities are linked economically and socially. A regional schedule laid out by the legislature was the better way to go. Next, we concluded that there is no one solution to poverty in our state, no silver bullet. Raising the wage will certainly not solve the problem of poverty. We still need to work on the earned income tax credit, employment-related daycare, making housing more affordable. We need to invest in workforce development so we can give workers the skills that they need to help attract business. Finally, tackling this problem, we concluded, is a job for the legislature, not for the ballot. The issues are too complex and interests need to be balanced. Campaigns that inevitably reduce those complexities to simple sound bites or thumbs up, thumbs down are not the answer. The result is the bill that I described a couple of hours ago. In its original form, we had 3 regions with increases phased in over a number of years, but with the actual increases initially left to be determined. We got help in coming up with the numbers to put into those schedules as a result of some lengthy discussions that happened thanks to a group that the governor put together where the needs of business and the needs of workers were looked at and talked about, and ultimately led the governor to propose some numbers to help us fill that schedule. As you know, the original 3-region concept was briefly replaced by a 2-region proposal. And that was because there was concern that 3 regions would just be too complex for this short session, and it would be more difficult to enforce. But as soon as those proposals came out, I and I think many of us, began to hear from a lot of people in the very rural parts of the state, in the frontier parts of the state, who were asking us to go back to the third tier idea because their economies are different. They are facing very different needs. And we listened, and that's why Senate Bill 1532 has these three regions. I want to, just before I get to my close, say Senator Thatcher, the good vice chair of the Committee on Workforce, mentioned the issue of how you determine if where an employee works. Where is the employer location? And I just do want to clarify, just to put on the record, in committee we used the example of a Les Schwab located here in Salem. Imagine a worker who works for Les Schwab, and Les Schwab, they do great work, they're willing to go anywhere. They go out and answer a call out in an area that's within the Portland urban growth boundary, right? So they have a worker, if we would imagine that they would make such a roadside call, if they go into the urban growth boundary, are they now to be paid at the Portland Metro rate, or do they remain at their Salem rate, their Marion County rate? Or the corporate headquarters for Les Schwab is in Bend. Are they paid at that rate? Well, the answer is that they would be paid at the Salem rate, the Marion County rate, because that's where they're based, even if they leave to perform some service outside of that area. So in closing, colleagues, we've heard from hundreds of Oregonians on this issue over the last year. You heard that from a couple of the other senators on the Workforce Committee. I want to say that I really sympathize, and again, I think I speak for all of the members of the committee, with the concerns that we heard from employers who came in from various parts of the state to share their perspective. These are good people, good Oregonians, proud of their contributions to our economy and the livelihood that they provide their workers. They shared their sense of uncertainty and they feared the worst. For them, their fears for the future were real and remain real, and I fully respect that. But at the same time, we heard from many workers from all over the state whose fears were not at all for the future or speculative. They were real and actual. They faced hardship and self-denial, difficulty and humiliation every day. They weren't afraid that the sky would fall, colleagues. The sky is falling on them, and a higher wage will bring them gradual but immediate relief. Colleagues, it is our task as legislators to craft a policy that takes the needs of all Oregonians into account. I believe that this bill does that. I urge and I vote.
Senator Doug Whitsitt, please.